Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we delve into one of the great truths of the mystical awareness of the universe, the 12 around the one, as it's called, and out of which cosmometry emerges in many dimensions. Before we get into that very, very deep and wonderful domain, I want to provide an update on a psionic summit that we had yesterday here at Ubiquity University in partnership between our ET Studies program and Transdimensional Mapping and the California Institute of Human Sciences and the Richard Dolan organization and Hubcast that live streamed it on the ethical guidelines that humanity should be embracing in terms of its ET contact. And if you haven't seen it, it's well worth watching. It's about 2 hours in length. It followed the first psionic summit that we had on the 23rd of February, which was really looking at the general phenomenon of psionics. Psionics is after psi. Psi is consciousness. Psi is everything that we include in the paraphenomenal world. Clairvoyance of all kinds, remote viewing, mental telepathy, anything that has to do with our psychic capacities for awareness and communication. This is something that has been actively repressed in Western civilization almost for the last 2,000 years, as it was held suspicious by the Christians. And then with the Enlightenment, they asserted categorically it wasn't even true. And therefore, anybody who engaged in anything psychic and not understandable was probably a witch. Certainly satanically inspired and needed to be either burnt or severely repressed. And now, in an extraordinary, what Jung would call an enantiodromia, where one polarity turns into its opposite, that which we have denied as a culture is now emerging as literally our only pathway to the survival of the human race as we teeter on the brink of self-destruction, caught in the vice grip that the consciousness that produces the problem can't solve it. So try as we might, we are not solving any of our global problems because our consciousness that is trying to solve them is locked into how we created the problems. We can't get out of the box until the ETs have shown up. And with literally thousands, possibly millions of human beings over the last 80 years have been communicating through mental telepathy. And all of a sudden, the telepathic is beginning to emerge in human consciousness. And not just from the extraterrestrials, but if you've listened to the telepathy tapes, some of the most severely autistic people, and there are more and more autists, we're discovering that they are, for the most part, completely clairvoyant, with capacities not only in terms of remote viewing and mental telepathy, but prophecy, healing, communication with the ancestors, communication with each other in different parts of the world on a regular basis, in the psi field, in the etheric fields, capable of actually contacting and connecting with the Akashic field. and downloading different languages instantly. Encyclopedic knowledge of obscure and deeply ancient civilizations and truths. So what we have been doing at Ubiquity University in our extraterrestrial studies program, and in a partnership we have with the Monroe Institute and transdimensional mapping and others that are coming on board, is we're putting together literally a consortium of groups that are dedicated to exploring the domain of consciousness, teaching young people of all ages how to engage in remote viewing and other psychic capacities with an intent to elevate our consciousness and learn how to engage in intelligible communication with other species and with other life forms, including the ETs. So our Psionics 2 summit from yesterday was really exploring this whole phenomenon and how we humans need to orient ourselves now toward a faculty we can't see, through faculties we can't really measure. And we're still not totally convinced it's true, but its efficacy is gaining in the culture. And we're right at a tipping point of coming into a whole new awareness of the capacities we humans have had all along, which most of the species around us practice every single day. And if we only open ourselves up, we will recreate the world from the point of view not of our problems, but through consciousness, from the view of our possibilities. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Humanity Rising. It's always a pleasure. We'll keep you posted of other events and opportunities as we move forward. I'll put the link of the Psionics Summit in the chat for those of you listening on Zoom. Now we want to turn to Cosmometry with a woman, Lizbeth Rymland, who's dedicated herself for decades into studying some of the mystical sacred geometry, particularly this configuration of 12 around the one, with which I'm actually quite familiar, given our pilgrimage every year to Chartres. Those great stained glass windows are all built around the 12 around the one configuration. It's a mystical number of deep significance, not only in Christianity, but in all the ancient mystical traditions. So we want to invite Lizbeth to join us now. She's in Ecuador, and she'll make a presentation on her understanding of cosmometry, and then we will have a dialogue, and then she'll join the after chat when we're done. Thank you, everyone. Lizbeth?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for a beautiful introduction.
There you go.
And I prepared something to read. It actually reads like I'm speaking, but now I'm jumping in like I usually do, and I'm in my nature is my throat center is connected to the spleen, so I'm tend to be spontaneous no matter what I do, but I'll return to that. But I did want to introduce some threads or themes of my life study, which has included, I've lived in many cultures, and I've lived long enough to know the people well. But since I was 19 years old, I was in a study, probably younger, of something that cultural anthropologists or participant observers called emic analysis, which is the ability or the attempt to know perspectives of beings and creatures, human and non-human, very different than our own experience. So emic analysis has been really the driving force, or at least that's the academic word for what I have, by creation energy, been moved to do for my incarnation. And so I began that study and I began traveling like a mad traveler. I wrote a book once called Fugue States, which is about mad travelers, but I lived in different cultures and I lived often long enough and studied long enough to get to know very different perspectives. But sometimes it was a whirlwind tour where I was just finding and meeting old kin in different lands and different places, some people that were tribal people who were like the Amazonga community, they call themselves forest intellectuals, but they have the mother lode of amazing knowledge, and their favorite sport, spiritual sport they call it, or spiritual game, is just like emic analysis, because what they love to do more than anything else is to know the mindedness of beings, including the sirenas that live at the bottom of the lagoon that teach them about healing mental illness using the plants, and the trees around the lagoon that they taught me that the spirits often move through the lagoons. Their ancestral spirits occupy lagoons and boulders. And they've learned the mindedness of bats and boas and eagles, and they call extraterrestrials the hori hori malo and the hori hori bueno, which means the good and bad ETs. But they actually have enjoyed what they've learned and can speak of what they learned from all of these different beings. And I worked with them from 2003 till 2000. The last time I was with them was in 2021. So I've had a relationship helping them to buy their ancestral lands and also to make a Wayusa tea company. The Wayusa tea company I made with Tyler Gage and with the oldest son of 16 of the Amazonga. They're Quichua, Shuar, and Ashwar from Pastasa. And we made Wayusa is a morning beverage or a dreaming tea. And the dreaming tea is based on clarifying the dreaming with this Wayusa. They analyze their dreams in the morning. So I'm going to start from the beginning of my talk, but I just wanted to let you know that that is a piece. Emic analysis has to do with coming to learn and know the perspectives of cultures and beings very different than our own. So here I'm going to start from the beginning of my text. Okay, so as a lifelong traveler and a participant observer living in various cultures, and as a listener and student of various cosmovisions, I long collected and documented the best features of what indigenous elders and visionary pioneers teach others and their young, in order to engender offspring as integral or whole humans, spinning lively cultures conducive to maximum intelligence increase. I dreamed curriculum and systems conducive to the creation of neighborhoods and homes as learning environments. So this talk is a proposal. It's a seed for a series describing the act of co-creating a visionary homeschooler's almanac to this interdisciplinary and transcultural humanity rising community as a 12-around-1 system following the life process endogenous to all living phenomena. So I am aware that Humanity Rising has created its own living curriculum that informs many people in many disciplines, but this was the vision. I've made 3 editions of this book of 12 chapters of these 12 values that I outlined as what I thought were the human values that together create very alive and humans connected to the imagination of the waking dream of nature. Each chapter I created contained lists of 52 weeks worth of experiential lessons, cultivating faculties of thinking, feeling, divining, or knowing, and doing or fabricating in these 12 zones of life cultivation known to students and maestros of astrology. To organize and preserve endangered knowledge quickly, I imagine the librarians of antiquity had to prioritize and categorize a broad spectrum of endangered knowledge into the smallest number of archetypal themes. Like a cosmic accordion folder, these archetypal themes of life include all human endeavor, all phenomena, all human intelligence and types, and all human studies, and manifest phenomena, and the manifest phenomena into 12 values. These 12 types needed to be able to include all kinds of anomalous phenomena, human studies and human types, including phenomena like blind golfers or the echolocating blind boy named Ben Underwood, who, though blind, could ride a skateboard and play foosball, acting as a sonic echo receiver. And this was a super faculty he had that was previously assigned by Mother Nature to the bat people of tree and land and the cetaceans of the sea. The disabled people on Earth, a majority population, when the disability is congenital or the impact to the sense faculties comes early, are often our evolutionary advance guard. As Jim mentioned, the autists, they often extend the mind and will of humanity into new terrain of supersenses. This type of superintelligence of the disabled belongs to zone 3, represented archetypally by Gemini of the mercurial connective mind. If the 12 around 1 system that I present is to be a viable prompt for interdisciplinary groups of knowledge preservers, it has to include all anomalies. So why 12 around 1? Why not 13 inclusive of the Mayans or the constellation of Ophiuchus? Ophiuchus merely sticks his leg into the sequence between the 29th of November and December 17th. But the 12 constellations from Aries to Pisces as a life process algorithm contains all themes of life, mind and phenomena from the number 1 or first zone or house of Aries, symbolic of the fiery cosmic seed that lands on Earth. The newcomer is yet unnamed, all the way to the 12th zone or house of Pisces, when the life form completes its mission, when the well-worn life casts off its form and returns to the dream time. The 12 constellations from Aries to Pisces have been recapitulated in all systems which organize and unify us socially. We're brought together daily by tracking the 12 hours of the day. We're brought together and with nature over 12 months of the year. We're unified in vibration and melody via 12 notes of Western music, all following the 12 around 1, the 12 signs of the Chaldean zodiac, the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. These 12 integral zones of all life cycles follow a growth algorithm as a life process cycle. The number 12 also follows the 12-year Jupiter cycle around the sun. Jupiter takes a year in each archetypal sign of the zodiac and returns to each sign after passing through in 12 years. And I just want to add here also that when I introduced this to Ecuadorian friends who are a very wise community, I speak of the 12 apostles, of course, surrounding the sun of the sun. Jupiter, the master of higher mind of the cosmic traveler, is the planetary deity of wisdom beings and wisdom traditions. Jupiter is the lord of perennial wisdom and all experiential knowledge known and channeled by ascended masters, sadhu, scholars, peace judges, sovereignty lawyers. Jupiter has a 12-year cycle around the sun. Jupiter not only symbolically represents your personal areas of expansion in your unique astrology charts and your personal areas of karmic harvest, good karmic harvest, Jupiter is a force or deity producing neutrinos through each of us, our bodies every moment. While it's not possible to determine the exact number of neutrinos originating from Jupiter that pass through our bodies every second, billions of neutrinos, primarily from the sun and cosmic sources, pass through our bodies every second, and these neutrinos are virtually undetectable. Since 2014, living in Vilcabamba, Ecuador, so it's near the border of Peru, I've shared this 12 around 1 growth algorithm or cosmometry with local schools, both charismatic and invisible leaders, eco-villages, as a tool to be playfully implemented in neighborhood gatherings. It may be used to organize these 20 neighborhoods around a central parish towards survival of culture and education through collapsed due to natural or man-made disasters, such as hurricanes, man-made and natural plagues, man-made and natural floods, man-made and natural fires. In 1986, when working in a think tank called International Synergy Institute, consulting with Ted Turner of CNN, 8 years prior to the internet, we were hired to inform Ted Turner and his team about the coming of the internet and the World Wide Web. I used this cosmometry to conceptualize and organize a planetary television network prior to the internet, or in case of collapse of the television and the later collapse of the internet. Ted Turner had a wild attention span, so to capture his attention, I made a highly visual and memorable set of 12 distinct lists of programming ideas like visual memes to create corridors of familiarization between distant cultures that were long separated by one-way media programming, one-way TV. The 12 zones were a heterarchy designed to evolve the new planetary nervous system following a life process cycle or growth algorithm. So these 12 distinct programming zones, I visualized that the old television network was a wasteland. It was like it was smoking, and, it had been a very schizoid, entropic kind of wasteland where you'd see a tragic event juxtaposed with a demonic clown, that was, it just was a very entropic process. So these 12 distinct programming zones were like thematic floating islands, or caravanserai programming hubs, a 12-part hierarchy of needs that future visionary programmers from a world of subcultures might use to trade the best solutions, playfully and seriously, toward survival of their endangered knowledge and peoples. All from their own ancestral archives. That's another piece that was. So these cosmometries were shared, but have really never been applied. My 12-part visionary homeschooler's almanac was shared from time to time, but unlike other things I've written, it was never published. I published other things, I helped and catalyzed in other ways, but this hasn't happened actually in its time or my time. It hasn't happened. Perhaps it will now. It did happen in the case of Ted Turner. I got to spend a day with him when he bought his new network and presented to all the moguls at the Beverly Hills Hotel. But basically, and I got to sit at his table because of that paper. But actually, this is something that may or may not have a life. And I think I'll just probably work to put out the book in one way, but I like it. I made it to collaborate with others. So I made it to collaborate with interdisciplinary transcultural collectives like this group has so many different perspectives. And then because we're so complex and vast, as Humanity Rising has this vast, wealth of knowledge, it's very important to make these 12 zones or prompts. So in 2010, I began to dream of ways I could share the beauty I've experienced in my travels and studies with the new children in the form of lessons that were informed by the imagination of nature and the waking dream, lessons that were timeless and memorable. Giordano Bruno, who lived between 1548 and 1600, was an Italian philosopher, poet, alchemist, astrologer, cosmological theorist, and esotericist. He's known for his cosmological theories, which conceptually extended to include the then novel Copernican model. He practiced Hermeticism and gave a mystical stance to exploring the universe. He proposed that the stars were distant suns, surrounded by their own planets, and he raised the possibility that these planets might foster life of their own, a cosmological position known as cosmic pluralism. He also insisted that the universe is infinite and could have no center. And Giordano Bruno, before he was burnt at the stake, taught his students various styles of natural memorization of visual content, which was useful to orators. Renaissance orators or speakers historically used the ars memoria, the arts of memory, by visualizing rooms of an eternally built memory palace with a sequence of rooms filled with wild images, the elements of their lectures. Bruno taught his students oratory, and he taught his students of oratory ways to fill each room in one's internal palace with images striking enough to pierce the threshold of memory. In this way, their oratory was remembered and animated by these enlivening visuals. So to deliver the best of what we have seen and known to our progeny, our new children, we create practical wisdom lessons as imaginative as nature, but based on universal axioms of natural law, a dream to create an annual compendium of lessons, cultivating 12 zones of experience, lessons developing each of the 4 faculties of feeling, thinking, divining, and doing, to design and fabricate experiences for children and for young people and for all of us as children and young people. For the lessons to pass muster, we imagine or choose lessons that are timeless, inspiring, and striking enough to pierce the threshold of long-term memory. The aim was to make yearly an almanac of 12 chapters with 4 times 13 or 52 weeks worth of time-transcending lessons based on 12 archetypal intelligences or talents, inclusive of all human intelligence archetypes or talents. To choose lessons most intrinsic to growing totally alive and functional initiatives, the aim was also to create a sustainable neighborhood network of visionary learning environments. In the springtime of 2014, when I landed in this village town in southern Ecuador, populated by Ecuadorians and foreign residents and visitors, where over 70 mother tongues have been represented in the past 11 years. My friend Annie from Brighton painted a mural on the wall here in Vilcabamba that is a language tree. So you can see the branching languages from their original languages that have been represented in this little village surrounded by mountains, the sacred valley of Vilcabamba. I just want to also tell people that don't know that this place, Vilcabamba, was historically, it was the place where the indigenous people from the Americas came on pilgrimage to work with the sacred plant medicines that grow in abundance here. So it was never, this town was never a marketplace. It was always a ceremonial hub. And people have called it a longevity valley because of the clarity of the waters and the clean air. So that is why it's attracted many kinds of people and also elders, as it was a longevity village. So some foreign residents not speaking Spanish weren't aware of how wise our local neighbors are until recent fires and floods. Many others, bilingual travelers and residents, are fortunate to know that our neighbors and the wisdom of how we have the structure of nested neighborhood organizational structures into parishes. And they are nested into province governments within the nation structures for communication. So due to the current fires and floods, many have learned how resourceful, how materially detached and spiritually alive and committed our neighbors are. The government of Ecuador is organized into a parish system. I'm repeating that, but it's in our instance, for instance, our parish is surrounded by 20 independent neighborhoods. And the other neighboring parishes are 15 minutes car drive or horseback ride south. The other neighboring parish center is 15 minutes drive or horseback ride north. So those neighboring parishes have 8 or 10 neighborhoods each. So that to me was very exciting. And I can flash back, I'm going to flash back to when the Sustainable Neighborhood Network I activated in Santa Cruz was part of my dreaming. So years ago, as a newcomer, I'd recently relocated to the old growth pine forest of the Santa Cruz Mountains. I was walking the hills of my new neighborhood one morning, talking to the sun. I was seeking the sun's response to my inquiry on what is my purpose in this place at this time, when suddenly I received a fresh thought directly from the sun, from beyond my limited thought system, that my next work in the Santa Cruz Mountains was to initiate the creation of the Sustainable Neighborhood Network in this university town. It came while I was marveling at a sequence. This vision came while I was marveling at a sequence of intelligent faces of my neighbors that I saw through the windshields of their cars, I thought, wow, who on earth are these characters who have raised their families here, who have stood firm in preventing the installation of street lamps so that we can still see the stars? I made the rounds to meet the neighbors. I made a brief survey to know the neighbors, to understand the intelligence, skills, or talents resident in each home, with questions about what undiscovered talents they had to offer for compensation, whether in money or trade of skills. And then, though that was a fanciful piece of footwork that I, as a newcomer, I could do because I was offering cookies or, different offerings to my neighbors and introducing myself. The next summer, the mystery provided a means to further that inquiry. At Ralph Abraham's 70th birthday party, I met Dr. Paul Lee, a Harvard Divinity School graduate who lived in Santa Cruz. Paul offered me the opportunity to recreate the county's defunct environmental council. He told me there were 100 or so organizations competing to survive from the same pots of gold. And he paid me in advance for my summer job, and I worked from the office of the visionary lawyer Danny Sheehan. You may have heard he worked on the Pentagon Papers, and he worked on Stephen Greer's UFO disclosure project and the Watergate break-in and the Karen Silkwood case. He's an amazing visionary lawyer. And so in the first days of my summer project in that office, I rapidly discovered that I was an unknown or a novice in competition with the most powerful environmental group in Santa Cruz called Ecology Action. So as I began to call the 100 organizations from a directory, I discovered that the most effective and powerful group, Ecology Action, was already working on a similar project. And since Dr. Paul Lee had already paid for my summer work in advance before leaving for his vacation, I needed to create something that didn't yet exist and that would serve all 100 causes of all environmental groups at once and in new ways not yet considered. So I began to let each group know of the Sustainable Neighborhood Network, a project that came a few years prior to the Transition Towns initiatives. And I let the groups know of potential neighborhood patterns that could knit communities together into a network of sustainable neighborhoods solving a variety of environmental problems. So at the hotel luncheon made for all the groups by Ecology Action, the Sustainable Neighborhood Network had its own table to support rotating visitors of environmental scientists and activists of all kinds. And you all may have heard, I was inspired, always inspired, and actually included in my writings, sometimes the architect Christopher Alexander's book, A Pattern Language, which was a collaboration of 200 architects managed by 5 co-creators. So together we imagined patterns for neighborhoods, such as neighborhood greenhouses and neighborhood solar generation, neighborhood old people's rest house, neighborhood teenage society cottages, late night documentary house. So we were imagining patterns that would heal the social and environmental problems of the area. And like many catalysts, I moved on from that, but only after that gathering where I got to meet, the members of those environmental groups. And then years later, inspired by the same muse from the sun, the Transition Towns initiative began. So it was an interesting thing to just watch how the sun actually seeds so many of us at once to co-create these projects. So when I moved to Vilcabamba and discovered the design of the neighborhood system, I thought 12 around 1 cosmometry could be introduced by a lively and simple game. And working recently with my Mexican friends who are a brilliant theater family of performance and storytelling, we have been envisioning a game because we have in the neighborhoods Casa Comunales, and we have festivals, Saints' Days and festivals. So we have been dreaming of ways to gather people in a circle with their faces outward and their backs to the center. And someone, dynamic theater friend calls those 12 types one by one. That circle is nested within a larger clock face that's written on the volleyball court floor. And each type is called one at a time, and then they're taken to from 1 to 12 in a sequence. First, the first group is taken to number 1, and then the rest of us gather around that group of the seed people, or the pioneering leaders of new initiatives. And we, in our little notebooks, we write their names and find out what neighborhoods they're from. And then on the back, we can write who we know who has those gifts, who may not be present, like our cousins or our children or our grandfathers that have those skills. Then, because people have more than one of those talents, we return back to the circle and we call the second zone. And again, we go and we surround the second zone. So that's the way the game has been dreaming itself. So the premise is that there are 12 talents for surviving collapse of money or internet or electricity, and each of these talents were called in a sequence as questions to the assembled crowd. Now, the thing I wanted to say is the nomenclature that I've used to define the 12 values of talents are different for collective survival through potential collapse of culture, or from collapse of emergencies. They're different than the nomenclature I used to name the zones of Electronic Dreamtime TV for Ted Turner, and they're different than those 12 zones that we use to make retreats of 12 days, so these so that people can study those zones of their lives, the people on retreat. So it's a wonderful system to just take complexity and divide it into the elements. Okay, I'm going to go down to the lessons. Okay, so we're going to talk about the zones now, and I'm going to go from the 1st to the 12th zone. These are zones to generate lessons. The prompts are to inspire from groups of artists, teachers, parents, and grandparents of all disciplines and cultures, experiential learnings from our own voices of experience. From our own survival of all kinds of spiritual emergencies and all kinds of droughts or wars, but also our inspired learnings from the beauty ways of nature. So the first zone, the first house is the seed people as the Aries archetype. So the seed people receive the first impulses. The seed people are archetypally Aries of the first zone of the early springtime. They receive the fiery seed, the unprecedented and as yet unnamed seed from the cosmos. The seed people name that unnamed of the newcomer, the timely and singular peculiarity. And once named, branded, styled, they announce it. They call others together to announce the new arrival and are true to the original vision and the first impulse from the beginning to the end of their first meeting. In the spirit or attitude of mentalism and positivism, the Aries is an archetype that exists in all of us that stays true to that first pulse or seed in thought, word, and deed. The seed people are collectors and preservers of unmodified and ancestral seeds for the gardens on the physical plane. The seed people are leaders of new beginnings. They are adept in how to begin gracefully and beautifully in the beauty way, the new initiatives and gatherings. The seed people are first responders in crisis or emergencies of collapse of man-made systems. They call the right people to the sites of fires and floods. Seed people are artists or pioneers who express through the seed impulse to burst through established boundaries into new territory. They are unself-conscious artists and saints, vital, raw, true, and unembarrassed by their impulsive natures. The seed people are the visionary pioneers of new initiatives. So I'm going to skip down a little bit. But even thinking in terms of phenomenology as an original pulse, like like Aristotle, the philosopher of the first metaphysics, that described the binary switch from 0 to 1, and the Steinerian anthroposophist that studied the elementals that make new phenomena, such as the fire spirits, the salamanders, the water spirits, the undine, the sylphs, the spirits of air, and the gnomes, the elementals of earth. So in the first zone, the name of the first zone value is cultivating divine self-commitment. So how do we make learning environments conducive and supportive of the cultivation of divine self-commitment? So in this way, in the Visionary Homeschoolers Almanac, we create lessons of our most memorable experiences of saints, artists, visionary pioneers we've known, whose style of being and MO emanated from creation energy. We make thinking, feeling, knowing, and doing lessons of our most memorable experiences. Okay, so the second zone is the second house, or the Taurus archetype, ruled by Venus. And Venus, just like Mars is like the primordial sperm that, has that drive to meet the egg and make many generations out of that spark and wins the race in the sperm world. The Venus has attractive power, the soil people. So the soil people, like microorganisms, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, the soil has the power of attraction, attracts the resources and wealth to grow the new seed. The deity in charge of the magnet of what we attract, according to our soul's deepest values and highest ideals for our soul evolution, is the deity or force of attraction called Venus. Sometimes we attract what we don't want with our little minds, but we do attract what we do need from our soul and oversoul, generally by surprise and for our greatest evolution. Not always comfy, not always comfortable. So I'm going to just skip down to speed it along a little bit here. So for any newcomer, initiative requires the best available resources to grow that new beginning well. Okay, so for the new children, the second zone focuses on memorable experiences and lessons toward cultivating primordial resourcefulness. That's the name of the second chapter, and it has its own essays or essay. It describes primordial styles of sustainable resource gathering as livelihood. Aborigines gather to themselves all they need, for example, on their walkabouts. Aborigines know how that treasure hunters are always hunting, never finding, and treasure finders are always finding, never hunting. So that, let's go down. The secret chiefs of the second zone are the primordial resource gatherers, including dowsers, map dowsers, herbalist foragers, trackers, pickers, nomads, gypsies, searchers, hunters and gatherers of surplus supply. So in a group, gathering, we ask for the searchers and gatherers of surplus supply, because if there's a fire, the first responder points to the sky and says, fire, and then it lands on Taurus, Earth, and the first thing people say is, my property, my land, my people, where's my bucket, where's my hose, where's my friends? The things we value, we're looking for to solve the problem of the fire. But in the third zone, which is the third house, the sprout people, Gemini archetype, that's ruled by Gemini's twinning power at the transition zone between self and twin, between self and neighbor, describing the mindedness and diversity that occurs in that rich borderland between self and other, between the ecosystem and its neighboring ecosystem. So in the case of a fire, when we don't have what we need, we call up, where's the messengers? Send out the messengers. So, that's Gemini, that's Mercury. Where are the techies? Where are the bomberos, the fire tenders, the people that really know about how to tend fire? And people here, there's amazing people that know so much about fire because they've grown up with it in fire season. So this third zone is about cultivating holy curiosity. It's the zone of mind, messengers, fixers, techies, problem solvers. This third zone is the zone of the sprout, becoming zygote, becoming embryo people. The sprout complexifies into embryo via connectivity, mental connectivity, complexifying. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, mutable air, the symbol that appears like the E.T. Uncle Martin with a pair and antenna on his head. Mercury rules the Gemini stage of twinning, the messenger. Mind is born at the interface between self and other. And it describes the mental or linguistic stage in all life processes or growth cycles of all phenomena. So even when we look at, afterbirth, the third stage afterbirth, the third zone represents the mental development of the crawling baby, the mental development of the crawling, testing, spilling, breaking, tasting, poking baby, completely armed for learning with the first two words, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? For all encounters between self and the unknown other, the birth of mind. And the twins of the third zone represent that interface. The diversity that occurs in riparian wetlands and mangroves, and also the secret languages that many twins have spontaneously spun with their siblings. So then for the third chapter, we generate lists 13 times 4 or 52 weeks of lessons following the seasons. It's all about how things work, how all phenomena works. And it can be studied by, it represents neighborhood techies, the neighborhood and trans neighborhood fixers, and the inventors of things. And it's I learned from Jay Baldwin from the Whole Earth Review. He was saying the reason he was such a master inventor was because of all of the disciplines he knows, geology and physiology and meteorology and mechanics and fluidics. He knew so many of those fields. That inventions come from that interface between disciplines. So for children, they find their own curiosity, their holy curiosity, and teach other children what they're curious about and how they're learning it. So so we can learn by, with children to explore by traveling to meet neighboring inventors, fixers, by traveling to meet the borderlands or interface between ecosystems, things like that, how things work and in accordance to the child and our own innate curiosity. So zone 4 is about cultivating magical habitat. So in the fourth zone of Cancer, we develop the natural tendencies of the shell people, the exoskeletal shell and crab people. The creative and nurturing, protective, defensive moon as mother, that's the ruler. The moon is the mother of Cancer. So the creative and nurturing, protective, defensive moon as mother is the ruler of Cancer is crab. It describes the extrusion of protective womb around the growing tender sprout, the tender thing we carry. We learn the maternal and paternal defense strategies of the shelled people. Now, some people say the moon is a description of the ego in an astrology chart, and it is. It's basically our first responder, first defender, just like the womb, of not self-stimuli, not self-provocation, or not self-distraction. So we can carry that tender mission in the womb through all of those distractions or provocations, the not self aspect. So that's why it's like the ego. So cultivation of magical habitat does include the cultivation of magical neighborhoods. And most of it is hopefully based on biomorphic design or biomimicry. We can study the non-human world through natural systems and natural life forms. And we have, of course, that also represents the warriors of our neighborhood. So it's basically who amongst us, the question you pose to the crowd, the gathered crowd after a emergency, is who amongst us are the protectors and cultivators of our neighborhood. And the protectors include the ex-gangsters, like I always think about the, what were they called? The guardian angels. The martial artists, the retired and active police and military. They include, all of those kinds of, the fathers and mothers as protectors. And it's a nice place to make neighborhood patterns too. That neighborhood is the place or base of neighborhood patterns, like the neighborhood heartbreak commiseration station or whatever you want to make, the necklace of children's projects, etc. So the fifth zone is the flowering phase of Leo, the fifth house ruled by the sun. In this zone, we cultivate spontaneous expression and ludic styles of learning through play. The birth of the newborn is, of course, the flowering of the gestation stage from within the womb. The baby is born through the flower of the mother. The flower lion, people ruled by the sun, are self-expressive from the loving sunshine that radiates from the core of their being. They want your love and attention and want to shower you with the same. They just want more sunlight and more room to express and shine. So the fifth zone is where artists, teachers, parents, grandparents, the improvisational maestros and genie from our network of neighborhoods practice the cultivation of spontaneous self-expression and the cultivation of spontaneous creativity with the new children. Now, one thing that's also wonderful is that I've copied as part of one of those lesson plans was wonderful suggestions with Rudolf Steiner. Of course, Rudolf Steiner I've read, but he talks about, you know, the self-expression that babies learn when they learn to walk and when they learn to talk, and the various things that you link up in the neural system of the baby so that they can become integrated when they're learning to walk and talk. And so he's got quite a few suggestions of the rhythmic rights. I named it the rhythmic rights of the child development, which is very expressive and playful and soul infused, as Steiner was and is. So the sixth zone is the Virgo zone. It's about cultivating spontaneous healing. So in the sixth zone, the being becomes self-conscious of its garden and of itself. The sixth zone is the purifying, cleaning, and weeding phase. It's the Virgo phase that separates the viable shoots, the necessary shoots from the invasive shoots. It separates the edible wheat from the chaff. Virgo is ruled by the planetary deity Mercury as well, also known as Mercurius and Hermes Trismegistus in his alchemical healing function. And Mercury works with the planetoid Chiron as rulers of the zone. So here we're cultivating spontaneous healing and daily service routines, daily maintenance, and daily purification, conducive to spontaneous healing. So when we reach the sixth zone focus of development, we become more fully human as we develop refined self-consciousness, self-awareness. We develop self-refining, self-examining, self-pruning, self-correcting, and self-perfecting of ourselves in the garden. It's always very refreshing, that Virgo aspect in friends, that ability to self-examine and self-correct. And so this is also the study of ways of opening the inwardly obstructed human vehicle or the outwardly obstructed garden beds or daily work systems to open channels of circulation receptive to the streaming flows of universal mind and universal energy medicine directed by universal mind. Because it's really the vessel of the Christos. We're making ourselves clean through circulating and healing and fasting and cleaning, removing obstacles to landing the Christos. And as a somatic being, the Virgo archetype describes the receptive and mutable earth. So it's very much a somatic archetype. It increases cellular receptivity or somatic receptivity to healing energies. So that is, yeah. So we aim this chapter of lessons to the doctoring genie in each child and elder, the nurse and doctor in each child and elder. So that's the name of the seventh chapter. And the secret chiefs of the zone are all kinds: healers, yogis, walkers, sun gazers, dancers, fasters, space and environment cleaners, sin eaters, transformers of waste, the sanitation engineers as trash men and recycling trash ladies. Okay, so the seventh is about cultivating ultimate partnership. It's the Libra zone. The seventh zone is the companion transplanting phase in the garden. Focus of the study is Libra-like of Venus again, and its seventh house or outward function is a relational function of harmonizing and balancing the love nature. And for this, and we brainstormed 13 times 4 lessons to focus the new children's faculties of thinking, feeling, knowing, and doing in experiential action-based lessons or contemplative studies, cultivating ultimate partnership. And we do that by deconstructing and reconstructing core issues that are intrinsic to all partners. We define them and unbind those differences in child rearing styles or resource money, spendings, and all of those kinds of things that couples need to mediate. And then we have secret chiefs of that zone, like the lifelong couples who have survived through conflicts, as well as the lifelong couples who have easily resolved conflicts. All kinds of mediators, tantrikas, connectors, matchmakers. And I was mentioning Milton Erickson, just how wonderful his teachings have been. Eighth zone, cultivating intimacy with the mystery. So in the eighth zone, we transcend self, the limited ego, via merging and sharing with others as other selves, such as mates, family of origin, family as progeny. Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio in the eighth house, is the planetary deity that knows precisely how and when to impact the small self, to devour the imposter and render a truly unmasked soul, leaving essence and soul force in its wake. As Pluto, as a force, has the superpower of spelunking, ferreting what is hidden and repressed, bringing the suffering and releasing it into the light of day. And so it involves the study of merging via intimacy. It involves resource sharing and trauma healing, because transformative process arrives when our energies and resources are merged with other selves. So that is, we can imagine the secret chiefs are folk psychiatrists who use sacred medicines in various cultures, psychologists, social workers, rolfers, emotional release healers, hypnotherapists. So we imagine 13 times 4 feeling, thinking, knowing, and doing ways to learn intimacy with the mystery. The ninth zone is about cultivating fearless wisdom. Sagittarius, ninth house, ruled by Jupiter. When we've accomplished and mastered the cultivation of intimacy, integrating our own projected shadows as a repressed part of the self, when we surpass all tendencies to blame, shame, and project upon other selves, we arrive at the ninth zone, the Sagittarian zone of more adventurous, jolly sages with a sense of humor, eager to wander and wonder as nomadic travelers. When we can laugh at ourselves and the trials of life and human foibles, we are ready to cultivate fearless wisdom, the domain of the ninth zone. So that's the act of flying above to see whole systems. That's why we can, the entire garden is seen from a higher vantage point. This is known by the traditional alchemists as the sublimatio. We see to the essence of things. We see from on high. We learn nature's principles and rules, the laws worthy of repeating according to natural law. And then we can, explore in the ninth zone the systems of natural law, of sovereignty law, imitative of living systems to cultivate new rules and forms of restorative justice. Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, may be compared to the Hindu elephant god Ganesh, as well as Santa Claus, because both of Ganesh and Santa Claus are expansive. They see the human condition from a sky view. They dispense appropriate karmic blessings and with a sense of humor. So then we're describing here restorative justice practices that people use wisdom councils, where and how restorative justice emerged historically. I got a little too specific with my list here, but the Haudenosaunee people of the Longhouse were in the Iroquois Confederacy and Bertrand Russell tribunals and all kinds of Arnold and Amy Mendel's process work. Good examples from Polynesia and Maya's people. Okay, so the 10th zone is about cultivating universal service, the captains of Capricorn. So with Capricorn as a soul focus, potential is gathered and focused to make, run, and assure excellent stewardship, the foundational organization and maintenance of complex projects, systems, and enterprise. So when we gather a group together, it's, who amongst us have been captains of complex projects and enterprise. And they exist from all the different neighborhoods, and they're appropriate for different kinds of projects. So we don't have a person at the center. We have the Christos at the center, or we have a initiative from the sun at the center, but not necessarily a person at the center. That's important. The sustainable neighborhood network of humble captains, the trans-neighborhood network of our living faculty of captain mentors work together to focus the cultivation of universal public service. And then I was remembering the book entitled The 49 Laws of Power, which was a wonderful historical study, but of the wielding of these laws toward materialistic or mundane power in man-made systems. And nature, however, apart from man-made systems, has its own rules on the right use of will and power. So it reminded me of Marcel Vogel, the genius inventor of the liquid crystal display. Many of you, I know, have read and studied about him, but IBM gave Marcel Vogel his own laboratory to design and fabricate his crystal-based inventions. And it said that Marcel Vogel would never teach the ways of crystal tools of power from Atlantis until he was assured that his students passed days learning and demonstrating the lessons of unconditional love. And it reminded me also here again this is related to also Atlantis, the Edgar Cayce channelings of the sons and daughters of Belial and the sons and daughters of the law of one. I've just thought just that distinction that perhaps 50,000 years before Christ or beyond, when there was Atlantis, that the people remembering their Atlantean incarnations through Edgar Cayce's channelings divided all humanity between the sons and daughters of the law of one and the sons and daughters of Belial, between those who were involved with service to others, including themselves, and those that were just involved in self-glorifying or self-glamorizing, the sons and daughters of Belial. And that distinction is so important because people, in the divisive way that we do, we don't all know that 50,000 years before there were Hebrews, before there were Christians, before there were Muslims, before there were, these cultures, that they had an advanced civilization that divided them, that were divided in memory between these two types through Edgar Cayce's channelings. That can really help because there's a lot of tendency to blame types as culprits. So that's an important part of this part. And okay, so now we'll jump to the 11th. Oh, yes, and I mentioned, star seeds of intact memories of structural management styles. So this is a place we learn structural management, dynamic, fluid, organizational configurations that can adapt quickly to changes. That's it. We can imagine the management of humble captains applied to the healing of towns, where wise people, elders, and youngsters gather for weekend activities. Okay, skipping down to the 11th house zone of Aquarius is where humans learn the cultivation of communitas. And it's also where we learn the cultivation of tools and technologies of freedom that, in Fuller's terms, are omniconsiderate of all earthlings. And in these days and times, we may also learn via our Star Nations elders who meet for Star Nations conferences, a mix of indigenous peoples, space brothers and sisters, hybrid humans and non-humans. The Star Nations conferences have occurred for decades as representatives of what they have learned from one heart, one mind civilizations of our space brothers and sisters. And so 13 Moons of Star Nation Studies is one of the lists we can make. There's something that I've made different 52 weeks worth of lessons according to each, because Aquarius has those two levels. It has the local secret chiefs of that zone in our sustainable neighborhood networks that include adepts and running group processes conducive to one heart, one mind states of consciousness. That includes people like orchestra conductors, choreographers, band leaders, theater directors, sports teams, coaches, shamans, starseeds who remember and carry advanced civilizations. The people that can bring us to a state of communitas, as Victor Turner described, where all egos fall, even in times of war, like the, what did he used to talk about, Battle of Dunkirk, where all the egos dropped and everybody all of a sudden spontaneously goes out in their own private boats to fight the Battle of Dunkirk. So it's a state of consciousness that some people are very good at guiding. But then we also have crop circle and sacred geometries, earth sciences, research based on earth sciences, based on plasma science, quantum physics. And then we're finally, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. In the 12th zone, humans and non-humans, including incarnate cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and incarnate extraterrestrial kin, this is where we cultivate transfiguration. So this is the zone where we prepare for the great beyond. The secret chiefs include dream yogis and mental health workers and death doulas and funerary and estate planners and survivors of spiritual emergencies and psychotic breaks and lucid dreamers. And all kinds of people, the marginalized that are in astrology, the 12th house is the house of what's unseen by society, and it's subaquatic, it's ruled by Neptune, so it has to do with the sea and what's hidden underneath the sea, which has a lot of diversity and all kinds of creatures we have no idea what they are. But in social systems, the 12th house is also from the unseen marginalized, the formerly marginalized, which include prisoners and nursing in prisons and nursing homes and prisoners in mental hospitals. And it includes also the people who are the angels and the selfless attendants to the marginalized. That's also a 12th house function. So it includes studies of cities like magical powers and astral cities. And it's the realm of the human unconscious and the collective unconscious, known by mystic saints and channelers. And so that's it. We're done. Thank you for listening. And I am relieved because this has never really been shared by patient people as yourselves. So thank you so much.
Whoops. Lizbeth, are you there?
I just was giving you all a break from my words. Thank you so
I
much.
thought you had disappeared into the ether, into the 12th realm, 13th realm.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we'll adjourn to the after chat momentarily, but I did want to pick up on one of the comments you made at the beginning about getting a message from the sun. This is something that we've discussed a number of times on Humanity Rising, that thoughts and feelings that we may have, which we think are original to us, are actually coming from an external source, whether it's the moon or the sun or Jupiter. You were mentioning all the particles that are flowing through our body from different planetary systems and so forth. I'd like to just get your deeper sense of how that actually works as the kind of the photons come, say, from the sun. They interact with my body or anybody's body. How do you understand a thought arising out of that? What do you think is actually happening?
That's a wonderful question. Well, I tend to believe in nested spiritual hierarchies, so I think there's Davic intelligence. Ecosystems are nested within larger ecosystems, and for individuals receiving information, I think that, I had, and many of us are more in the quantum experience, and I did have seizures every 20 seconds or little 20 seconds of waking time. So I did experience kind of disappearing and reappearing, probably still, which is why I can't necessarily be a persona, because I can't really present and actually remember what I'm talking about unless I'm with friends. So things like that. So I think that we all are disappearing and reappearing. But we do have a special design that our vessel and our ancestors and our past lifetimes makes very unique that we can see in systems like human design and evolutionary astrology. So those are things I've practiced the last 11 years as a profession. To understand the unique design that receives unique information. And neutrinos are part of that. The human design talks about how at the time of our birth, through a belt that surrounds the earth. It's like a belt that has the I Ching hexagrams with 64 times 6 I Ching hexagrams, but the planets are situated at the time of our birth and 88 days before our birth, so that those neutrinos from the planet are actually focused through these channels that give us our unique qualities or our vessel design. Does that make sense? That's the way Ra Ruhu of the human design describes how the neutrinos come from the planets or the cosmos to make each of us a unique vessel for unique
Yeah,
paths.
yeah. And this whole notion of going in and out of existence is what Nassim Haramein says is happening. That at the smallest unit of
Mm-hmm.
what he calls these plunks,
Yes.
these plunks are going in and out of a black hole into
Mm-hmm.
manifestation every gazillionth of a gazillionth of a gazillionth of a second. And that is what holds the whole thing together, because when you go into the black hole, you're connecting with the Akashic field. And when you come out, you're going into your particularity. And it's that
Yes.
interface between the collective
Yeah.
connectivity and your specific particularity that makes the universe as wondrous and as complex and as extraordinary as it is.
Yes, the Planck came from, and that's something because I actually made a book that published a book called Strange Evolutionary Flowers, but Planck comes from Planck's length, right? I imagine he got that from Planck's length or Planck's distance, where we disappear into that
Yeah,
point
yeah,
of friction and we become everything. And
exactly.
in time, it actually does ratchet forth in time, even though there might be parallel timelines, but we come back to be uniquely ourselves by connecting to everything we're not,
Right.
and then coming back to our particularity. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's so interesting that, and then within that context, to think of these neutrinos and these photons that are by the billions flowing
Mhm.
through us every instant of every day, and we have no knowledge of it. We think we're going along as separate from the universe when every nanosecond we're filled with the universe in different combinations and frequencies. And so, you just walking along, asking the sun uh,
Mhm.
to guide, uh, and sure enough, it does.
Yes.
So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think, is there anything else you want to add just as a final comment to people?
Well, like many of us, we're all at the edge, and in terms of taking on any kind of plan or particular mission. I mean, I'm looking at my materials and I think it should be put out in some form, but I haven't since 2007 or 2011, the different stages of making this had the ambition. I haven't had the drive to put it out. But then I look at this and I think I wanted to pass this along.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, and I always made it for groups, not my own. I just made the examples. So I filled a couple books worth of examples, but I wanted it to come from a faculty of a new faculty that wanted to make their own book. So I don't really know. I can't do anything on my own. I'm too in the quantum disappearing and reappearing mode. I can't really. So
Nice
I
place to
hope,
be.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That'll bring us to a close for today, everyone. Elizabeth will join the after chat. You can see the link in the chat box that Stan just put up, and then you all receive the link to the after chat in your Zoom reminder for today. So thank you so much, Lizbeth. Good luck there in Ecuador. We'll see you in the after chat. Then we'll see everybody again tomorrow for another episode of Humanity Rising. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.